OSHA inspectors now. Defend the working people of California.
My name is Steve Zeltzer. I'm a member of the CWA Newspaper Guild. I'm also with the United Front Committee for Labor Party, and I produce a show, Work Week, about working people on KPOO. And we're here today at the Oakland State Building, California, the office of OSHA in Alameda County, demand that the state of California take emergency action to hire 1,000 OSHA inspectors. And California now, over a year, has been in a pandemic in which thousands of people have been killed in California, hundreds of thousands of people have been contaminated, and yet Cal-OSHA has less than 200 OSHA inspectors. And when you want to look at the transmission in factories and workplaces, Tesla, General Hospital, Highland Hospital, department stores, schools, workers are being infected because they're not being properly protected, despite the fact that Cal-OSHA has a responsibility, which Governor Newsom has admitted, to protect the workers of California. So you have to ask, why are there less than 200 OSHA inspectors in California to protect workers on the job, to protect workers and their families? And we believe the reason is that Cal-OSHA has been captured by the corporations like Tesla, by the Hospital Association. That's why there aren't more inspectors. Now, we believe that there need to be health and safety committees run by workers that have the power to shut down the jobs. But in most cases, there aren't. So the inspectors are a vital role in educating workers and talking about health and safety and what to do to protect workers. And I also want to say that I've had, and other workers have had, protests at the Tesla plant in Fremont, California. We've had rallies in hospitals around health and safety. I've been to many rallies by the California Nurses Association because nurses themselves have been unprotected. Nurses have to reuse masks. They have to beg for gowns. In fact, there was a worker who was fired, a nurse at Highland Hospital, for a picture of him in a plastic bag because he did not have proper PPE. So you have to ask, in the richest state in the United States, California, with billionaires and so much wealth, large number of billionaires in Silicon Valley, why aren't workers protected? Why do we still not have proper PPE? Why has Governor Newsom outsourced the distribution of the vaccine to Blue Cross, a private for-profit corporation? The reason is basically capitalism, is basically the Democratic Party is controlled by these billionaires, and they don't really give a damn about workers. Workers are disposable for the governor and the Democrats. It's not just Governor Newsom. The Democratic Party runs California. They have a supermajority. They could pass a capital tax on the billionaires to pay for testing. They could pay a capital tax to pay for proper PPE. And certainly for 1,000 inspectors, but they haven't done that, and they're not going to do it unless the labor movement and working people demand it and organize. So that's why we're here today, and we're going to have a number of speakers talking about the concerns they have on the job, because when you go to work and you're unprotected, not only can you get sick and die, but you can infect your family. And that is happening in California, in Central Valley, at Foster Farms, where workers have been infected. 12 workers have died. The ILWU has been affected. At the Port of Los Angeles, 700 longshoremen have been infected, and 12 have died in the Port of Los Angeles. And OSHA refuses, the management of OSHA, because of its lack of staff, have not done the inspections and not forced employers to abide by Cal-OSHA standards. So our first speaker is going to be Branton Phillips, and he's a auto worker at Tesla.
I worked at Tesla for many years. I am here because I care, as with a lot of the workers at Tesla. We have to be there because we need to make money for our families. But also the risk is we're going to bring home this terrible disease to our families. Okay, and not enough has been done. If you go back and just from the beginning of this pandemic, Tesla, the company itself, opened up 1 week early, okay, against Alameda County health coordinators, and that was wrong. Okay, nobody should be able to take thousands of workers' lives and just throw a dice on this. What was done inside, although a great attempt, it's not enough. And worst off of all, through HIPAA and whatnot, the company's not transparent. And we do need transparency. This is so important. Without this, I don't know, when I'm walking in, how bad an infestation it might be inside there. I don't know any of these things. We're not asking for people's names, but we're asking basically to know, especially in areas that might be contaminated. Where was the point of contact? Is the tracing being done? What is being done? I've been to numerous meetings. Tesla's gone through the motions, which is beautiful, but when you come down to it, they're not, and people believe this, I believe it, they're not really protecting people as well as they should at all. Social distancing, a lot of things inside, it's just not right. Okay. This all needs to change. It's the attitudes of everything. We're going in there to provide work, to make money, okay? Make money for the company, make money for the shareholders, okay? And then to make money for our families. But the risk is so great. I don't work, then what happens? I'm gonna stay home. I'm not gonna have any money. I'm gonna lose everything like this. But the other odds is I might lose my loved ones. So this is very, very, very critical right now. OSHA's let us down completely. I believe they have no teeth anymore with what's going on. And that's very, very sad. There's nobody to go to. We're not unionized for a number of reasons, and we should be. We have no voice as workers, and that's the most important thing. There aren't anything inside where we can talk to different people. And you go to HR, HR's for the company. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. And so we really need to step up. People need to actually get more involved. That's the most important thing. You know, I know people are just scrambling to actually keep their houses and keep their places right now, you know, and keep their health. But more should be done. More should be done from our area, and it's not being done. Not being done at all. And we've got nobody to turn to, nowhere to turn to. And it's completely frustrating, it's depressing, and it's pathetic, especially here in America. And I work at one of the biggest companies and one of the very richest CEOs, and still, I'm feeling like they're not doing enough, and I'm not alone on this. I am speaking out. I'm keeping it on safety. People worry about getting fired all the time there. It's an at-will clause. So that's a big concern. But if I don't say something, then who else does? It's very important that we do say things. You know, all we need is for evil to triumph, is for good people to do nothing. And I'm not going to do nothing. I'm going to do something. We're all doing something here, and that's very, very important. This needs to keep up.
Right on. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Branton, because workers do want to speak out. Workers are afraid of getting COVID and also being coerced to go on the job. And right now in California, Governor Newsom has demanded that the teachers go back to work and to the schools. And of course, we want the teachers to be able to go back to school, but at the same time, teachers have a right to a safe workplace, as well as the students. And teachers have died in this country by being forced to go back to work without proper protection. And joining us this afternoon in front of Cal-OSHA is Eric Bergman. He's a retired teacher, but he's with the Oakland Education Association and a member of Peace and Freedom Party. Welcome, Eric.
I'm Eric Bergman. I was an Oakland Public School teacher for 30 years. I'm co-chair of the Alameda County chapter of the Peace and Freedom Party. Steve and Frank have eloquently expressed my sentiments. I taught adults, and the school administrator and board eliminated the adult ed department, meaning 25,000 people are now without classes. And it's because they are just indifferent to the suffering of people who are of color, people who are born in other countries, people who are low income and working class. I encourage us to consider potential allies, reaching out to potential allies, those in business, those in government, our friends, our neighbors, for us to find common ground, for us to say, For example, I would like you to have safe living conditions and safe working conditions, sending the message that I'm hoping you too would support safe living conditions and working conditions for others. Another part of this is reaching out to the faith-based community. There are many, and if we can speak their language, that what we're doing is lifting the fallen. Lifting the fallen. We're following the precepts in Scripture that we are to help those who are suffering. We are not to stand idly by, that we are to perform acts of loving kindness toward others as we want others to perform acts of loving kindness toward us.
In San Francisco, the city attorney, with the support of Mayor London Breed, another Democrat, have sued the school district to force the teachers to go back to work. And they have an agreement, but our view is certainly there should be vaccinations of teachers and other essential workers before they're forced to go into an unsafe situation that may kill them, that may contaminate themselves, sicken them and their families. And it's an outrage, it's coercion. And our next speaker is with the Alliance of Independent Workers, Edward Escobar.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Edward Escobar. I'm with the Alliance for Independent Workers. I'm a worker, essential worker, but I'm also the founder. And we're here speaking on behalf of essential workers, not just gig workers. And gig workers, for many people that don't know, it comprises like Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, delivery drivers, but also nurses, teachers, truck drivers, taxi drivers, bus drivers. So it's a very broad category, but it's very essential. Without that, this economy would come to a total shutdown. And we cannot allow for that to happen because it is squeezing us out of existence. You cannot bury your head in the sand like an ostrich and expect problems to resolve themselves. OSHA needs to have a plan. And the plan is, if they're not planning for a safe reopening, they need to have inspectors. They need to have 1,000 newly hired inspectors. 200 inspectors that they presently have is not enough. A lot of those very inspectors are afraid of going into these workplaces themselves. So if they are concerned for their own safety, imagine the businesses that are struggling and cannot open because of these unpractical, illogical shutdowns with no plan for a safe reopening. What is a safe reopening? It means providing PPE to the workers. It means having safe practices in the workplace with social distancing, with barriers between individuals so that way they could continue working without contaminating each other. It also means hazard pay. They've equated what we're going through right now as wartime. So during wartime, you have the military soldiers that are out there, they get hazard pay, they get wartime pay. So why are not the essential workers who are on the front lines, why are they not getting that hazard pay? You have grocery stores that are complaining in Southern California. They're shutting down. A couple of them are shut down because they're saying they can't afford the additional amount. Yet they've been the most profitable during this period than many other businesses. So what they're doing is they're fighting labor. And they're not wanting to usher in this new opportunity for labor to have more rights. So during this time, you have these corporations that are practicing this exploitationist behavior, that more so than regular, they're taking advantage of this COVID period, which is a paradigm shift. And they're not giving the proper support so that you understand the essential workers, if they are not given the proper protections, then they could be contributing to super spreader situations because they are in touch with many people. There have been families that have stayed at home, sheltering in place. They haven't been out. They had a delivery done to them. They were contaminated by the essential worker delivery person. Why? Because they weren't given proper PPE, sanitizing, disinfectant, all these other protocols during the time of COVID. Right now, it's extraordinary times, requires extraordinary efforts. And Cal-OSHA needs to provide more inspectors. We have the money. The money is not being used. In many cases, you see the streets are empty. So the city workers, they're not getting paid. They're being furloughed, so on and so forth. So take that money, provide a path to a safe reopening for our economy. Not just here, but across the country. But California leads the way normally. And it is unacceptable for them to continue in this way without a plan, a real serious plan for a safe reopening. So OSHA, hire 1,000 inspectors. 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 Thank you. I'm Edward Escobar with the Alliance for Independent Workers.
One of the things that we should look at as well on an international level, that in China, in other countries, they have a Tesla plant in Shanghai. Amazon is all over China. And the situation is they're not getting contaminated, they're protected. So why is it that the Amazon plant in Shanghai protects their workers, but here in California at Fremont, they're not being protected. They are getting sick, and there's a contamination there. The reason is the Chinese government, despite the disagreements that I have, require the capitalists and the companies to protect their workers. They can be protected, yet they're not. So what that says to us is that the state of California, the government of California, the Governor Newsom and the legislature are refusing to require these companies to protect the workers. They're killing them. That is murder. When these companies can protect the workers, these billion-dollar companies can protect the workers, and they refuse to protect the workers, they should be held criminally liable. They should be prosecuted. And Bezos and Elon Musk should be criminally prosecuted for killing their workers for more profits, because that's what this is about. It's about protecting the profits of the corporations and the billionaires. That's really what this is about. It's profits over the lives of the workers. And that has to end, and we're demanding that these people be held accountable, they be criminally prosecuted, and the politicians who've allowed them to get away with murder really have to be held accountable as well. That's criminal negligence. So our next speaker is with the United Front Committee for a Labor Party.
Thank you, Comrade Steve. Thanks for everyone to show up here today. Folks, let's face it. The government hasn't done one right thing throughout this pandemic. This pandemic could have been over months ago if it had been handled correctly. Not one thing has been done right since the beginning. Businesses reopened early. Tesla opened illegally. Workers haven't been given proper PPE whatsoever. And now that the vaccine is rolling out, the same business mentality is dominating how the vaccine is rolling out. And since the government has failed in every aspect, people are not truly trusting the vaccine either, although they need it. In New York, the city has bought vaccine in stocks. It has stocked the vaccine, and now it's going bad. All these doses, all these vaccines that they had are going bad. They can't vaccine people. Not only here in this country, in France, they were able to vaccinate only 200 people in the entire goddamn country. And why? Because all the vaccines they bought and stocked to be able to resell to the poorer countries with ridiculous amounts of prices have gone bad. Capitalism is hurting everyone across the world in an illogical, irrational manner, and everything is going downhill. Everything is going downhill. Capitalism is not only harmful, it's irrational, and the pandemic will keep going and getting worse and worse, just not because of natural conditions, but because of this irrational system. Imperialist countries are stocking up vaccines. Poor countries cannot afford to buy them, and they are going bad where they stay. This can't be right. They're hurting the entire humanity. And if we are to get through this and survive this pandemic, we got to step up. The working class movement has to step up and demand proper vaccination under workers' control. Yes. Proper vaccination under workers' control. Proper vaccination under workers' control. Power to the working class, comrades.
Thank you. Yes. And what we have here is really capitalist chaos. As I said earlier, Governor Newsom has outsourced the distribution of the vaccines to Blue Cross. That's one of the reasons that Kaiser doesn't have enough vaccines. Kaiser covers 7 million people, but they're not providing vaccines to their members. So it really is a culmination of a whole system organized for profit only, not for the lives of people, not for the protection of working people and the masses. It's how much billions of dollars they can make. Our next speaker would like to address this question. Welcome, Nathan.
I'm a former Tesla employee as well. This pandemic has really left this world in scars. And there's only certain people that are feeling this pain right now. You know, I've had at least 4 relatives test positive for COVID. I've had at least 2 relatives go to the hospital. I'm fortunate to have not had any relatives pass away. But there are people right now who are not feeling the pain that workers are feeling right now, and especially the pain of black and brown workers on the front lines doing work that the wealthy elite do not want to do or support. And, you know, I think, was it Eduardo over here speaking a minute ago just about during the wartime era, how hazard pay was given to soldiers on the front line. And Oakland recently passed an ordinance demanding $5 raises to groceries on the front line for hazard pay. Really, that should be every worker. That should be every worker, not just in Oakland, but across the entire county, Alameda County, Bay Area, hopefully California. They deserve hazard pay. Additionally, what we're seeing is this crisis where the business owners are suing the cities whenever their employees demand for hazard pay. So there's an obvious contradiction there in whose interests are being protected. And if I could allude one more time back to the wartime effort, the top tier tax rate during the 1940s during World War II for the wealthiest earners was 90%. 90%. There was a tweet posted by Cori Bush, Senator Representative from Missouri, on November 10 of 2020. Billionaires have increased their net wealth by $675 billion. Billionaires have increased their net worth by $673 billion since the pandemic has begun. Meanwhile, 40 million people remain in unemployment. This was figures by November of 2020. So the gap has widened even further. So there's what they have been calling a K-shaped recovery, right? Where the top elite billionaires are getting hundreds of billions of dollars in all this new liquidity they call from the federal government, from the Federal Reserve. And all that money is going towards boosting shareholder wealth, not boosting the wealth, protection, and safety of workers. And that is a fundamental crisis. It is unjust, unfair, it disproportionately hurts black and brown workers. And what we've seen, I think, during the December 2020 unemployment figures was that it disproportionately affects women. I think over 90% of all people who lost their jobs in December 2020 were predominantly women. So we're seeing the sexism, racism, and fundamental unjust functionality of this economy. And when I think about even just a modest proposal, given the how many or so 18 million workers are in California, 1,000 workers, 1,000 inspectors is a drop in the bucket. And if we can't even get that, from this government, if we can't get that from our own employers, and when workers are demanding this, then I think what that will mean is that we'll have to keep on upping the ante. And I hope that when people hear the messages from the workers and the organizers who are here today, that people will think twice the next time they see these billionaires on the news, and think 3 times the next time they see how wonderful these billionaires are living. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of people are dying and suffering. And if that doesn't wake people up, I don't know what will, but I'll be showing up for anyone, any worker, any black and brown working class worker, any woman of color, any woman who's demanding that their rights and their voices are heard so that they can live a safe, dignified, and respectable life. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
The reality is that the pandemic has been good for the billionaires. They're making out like bandits. So when we talk about a system, a corrupt system, in which we're first pandemic in 100 years, and the billionaires are making out like bandits while people are in the streets, can't get health care, can't feed their children, that's a crime. That's a crime against the people of this country. It's wrong and it has to stop. And that's why we need to have the working people really be in charge. That the wealth of this country should go to the working people and not the billionaires. And unfortunately, our system is set up for profit. Our system is set up to make money off of people, whether they're sick, whether they need food, whether they need health care, anything. It's all for profit. That has to end because this system is destroying lives. It's destroying this country. It's destroying the people of this country. And we have to stand up and unite. So our next speaker is also a gig worker, an Uber worker, and welcome him.
Basically, I'm a gig worker myself, and I see how OSHA is not enforcing the standard, especially on the gig economy. We see repeated case of customers getting in the vehicles without masks and defending the right to do that, unfortunately, and defend the right to do that, and unfairly targeting Uber and Lyft drivers who actually demand that they put them on. So, I mean, we definitely need OSHA to step up. How about 800 more workers to definitely enforce these rules and regulations on these companies? Because right now, you know, we're trying to get this pandemic back under control, so we can risk even worse outcomes of epidemic of homelessness that would follow. So definitely OSHA. Try to give OSHA came with our demands of about 800 or 1,000 more workers, so we can basically start enforcing these codes. Thank you.
Uber and Lyft, by the way, supported Proposition 22, which allowed them to further exploit workers. Their profits went up by billions of dollars, and Uber and Lyft, the billionaires who own this, are now charging the workers for masks. Can you imagine that? That these billionaires are demanding that these workers who are basically struggling to survive have to pay for masks when these billionaires are making so much profit. That's the kind of injustice, crime against the poor people, against marginalized people, black and brown poor people who are trying to survive. They're being charged and exploited further by these billionaires. Profits for them is over lives. Profits are over lives. So our next speaker is Charles Rachlis, and he is a Cal-OSHA inspector.
Before I make my comments, I want to be perfectly clear. I'm not authorized, nor do I speak for Cal-OSHA, nor am I authorized to speak for the unions, which purport to represent the safety engineers and industrial hygienists who do the inspections. The opinions which follow are mine alone, and the facts can be checked by those with patience for such things. Workers have the right to expect on-site inspections conducted by qualified inspectors when they face hazardous conditions. They should have the right to inspectors who are not overly extended and buried in cases. But the state of California's government, run by the Democrats and Republicans, has presided over decades of under-resourcing and understaffing of Cal-OSHA. Because Cal-OSHA has been compromised, because OSHA itself is a compromise. It was a reform won by sustained class struggle of the trade unions. The government did not just say, you can have OSHA to oversee your workplaces. Workers had to fight for health and safety in the workplaces. So I speak out for building strong unions to fight for workers' interests. Unfortunately, most of us feel underrepresented by the union leaders whose strategic orientation is supporting the capitalist politicians. Rather than building militant unions that prepare for the class struggle and squarely call out the capitalist class war against labor, we need to resolve the structural problems of the state government. We have to reorganize the power relationship between the social classes. And that means we have to rebuild class struggle trade unions that fight for a revitalized labor movement and fight for a workers' party. Consider how the capitalist state maintains state agencies responsible for health and safety on the job. Last June, the Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, PEER, reported a 21% vacancy rate at Cal-OSHA. They reported that California has only one inspector for every 99,000 workers, a fraction of the ratio for Washington, which has one for 25,000, and in Oregon, which has one for 22,000. Now, I know for a fact that these inspectors are smart and well-trained. I know they are put in a solid 40 hours every week, often missing lunches and breaks, working late, because that's the job. And I'll tell you a fact. No one is that good that they can do the inspection job for 99,000 workers per inspector. Something has to give. On top of that PEER report, in a state, we have 18.5 million workers who speak other languages, but we only have 28 Cal-OSHA inspectors who speak other languages. Our inspectors are required to use translation services, which slow down the process of inspections. And these numbers haven't changed much in the last few months, and we don't expect them to change very quickly. The division loses employees, it loses experience, and it loses the historic and institutional knowledge. And when it hires new employees, the onboarding process is fast-paced, it is extensive, and it's long in duration. But it takes almost 3 years to onboard a new inspector, presuming they come in with the requisite knowledge and skill set. For years, the director of the Department of Industrial Relations, the previous one, Christine Baker, was making common cause with a corrupt human resources department run by Janice Yapojenko, while the union tops and the bureaucrats turned a blind eye. Indeed, managers and the rank and file in the know lived in obsequious fear of the corrupt power block which poisoned the department and prevented hiring and filling of positions. The dysfunction of the department was made public in an audit 2 years ago, and there's no need to beat that drum here and now, except that the repercussions continue to afflict the organization which emerged after the departure of the last director, ill-prepared and understaffed at the beginning of the pandemic. Today, the division, Cal-OSHA, is being crushed under the weight of hundreds of serious COVID illnesses and fatalities, and thousands of complaints from across general industry. The division is mandated to open inspections for serious occupational accidents, illnesses, and fatalities within certain jurisdictional guidelines. And it must also answer valid formal complaints. So managers have to triage, prioritizing serious illnesses, accidents, and fatalities for on-site inspections. Because of the sheer volume of complaints, the field inspectors are stuck at their desks for hours processing calls and using letters and phone calls to employers in lieu of on-site inspections. For the thousands of complaints, most of which are about COVID and the fear of potential exposure, inspectors in the district offices are stretched and pushed beyond their limits. They needed additional resources a year ago, 6 months ago. Yesterday would not have been soon enough. In the media and among politicians, and public health experts, the COVID pandemic has been likened to a war. In fact, other speakers have made that mention. Emergencies have been declared. We've gotten updates, daily updates, weekly updates by the governors, by the mayors, by the CDC, by public health. Yet throughout the course of the pandemic, the governor never authorized to immediately emergency action to cut through the red tape and expedite the hiring of staff needed to do the job. If there were a flood, there would be thousands mobilized to fill sandbags. This is a flood. Where are the thousands needed to do the work? The ruling class, with their wealth, have privilege of space and money to self-isolate. But essential workers are being exposed in work sites and are not being served either by OSHA consultation or enforcement in a timely manner because we do not have the troops to put out in the field. The good employers struggle to understand and implement the emerging, changing guidelines and standards. The problematic employers give employees grief with little fear of oversight from the understaffed division. The governor has not reached out to the universities to provide the division with emergency and temporary assignment of the most promising young engineers and scientists to integrate them into the division on an emergency basis. He has not utilized the resources of the state to immediately bolster Cal-OSHA because he represents the capitalist class, not the working class. Only a workers' government can ensure a robust, healthy, and safety for workers on the job. That's why we're campaigning for labor to break from the Democrats and build a fighting workers' labor party. We have to ask who should be enforcing the ATD standard. That's the aerosol transmissible disease standard. The governor did not mobilize retired medical professionals and have them onboarded and deputized and put in the field to consult and to enforce the very complex aerosol transmissible disease standard in the hospitals, the skilled nursing homes, the prisons, and the other congregate settings. Their expertise was left at home in lockdown. The ATD standard is not only very complex, it has very little history of enforcement. In normal times, the hazards addressed by that standard present in a manageable fashion in the healthcare setting. But today, essential workers want to know, why weren't these experts deputized? The National Guard has medical professionals whose knowledge could have been put to work by the division. Where's the National Guard? This is a health standard, and most of the inspectors are safety engineers, not industrial hygienists. Most of the inspectors who are enforcing it today never read the ATD standard until their first case within the last year. The history of underfunding science in state service is catching up with us now, and this is something I know a little bit about. I was a state scientist for 10 years before becoming an engineer at Cal-OSHA for the last 5. The 20-plus-year-old disparity between the engineers' and scientists' salaries has not been resolved. Hence, on top of being under-resourced, the division is woefully understaffed on the health side, meaning the division hires safety engineers and industrial hygienists, but cannot retain the industrial hygienists because they do not, they do the same and even more complex work for less money. Let's face it, the boss's political machine that created Newsom never planned for him to be a real innovative leader. They wanted and got a tool to enforce the will of the billionaire class and to never miss an opportunity to take back from the public workers he sits across from at the bargaining table for state employees. What did the governor do in the 2020 contract? With the sad rhetoric of, we are all in this together, and with not an audible peep from the unions, contracts were signed which cut state workers' pay by approximately 9.4% for 2 years. That's equivalent to 2 days of furlough a month. Then, faced with the crunch of work, he had to beg hundreds of workers to come back to work on overtime to fill up the EDD slots and give overtime for the overworked inspectors doing the COVID cases. In 2009, the Schwarzenegger response to the recession was to apply 72 days of furlough to state workers. In response, some state workers' unions negotiated no furlough clauses into their contracts, only to capitulate in 2020, accepting the equivalent of a furlough. While employees have the right to take those 2 days off a month, the essential work at Cal-OSHA are under such pressure from their case lapse time that they work right through those 2 days under promise to pick them up as CTO in the future. The 2021 budget provides for close to 180 new inspectors, far from the 1,000 or more that we need. But there are caveats and hoops to be jumped through before they're hired. And even with managers working around the clock to evaluate candidates, they will be hired and onboarded in time. They won't be hired and onboarded in time to support the pandemic response. Even with the 180 new inspectors, the division will not come close to the ratio in Oregon and Washington. So we face a myriad of problems here. I talked about the corruption at HR itself and the symptoms, but those are symptoms. They're not the source of the problem. I talked about the decades of the old chronic understaffing, and that's a symptom of the problem, but it's not the source of the problem. We talked about the understaffing that precipitated a culture of inspections driven more by the pressure to satisfy observable metrics than what lay beneath the surface at the inspection sites. And that's a consequence, but not the source of the problem. And the 20-year-old disparity between the industrial hygienists and the salary of the safety engineers still undercutting the division's ability to recruit and retain industrial hygienists is a consequence, but not the source of the problem. Indeed, it's essential to understand that OSHA as an organization was an essential gain of the working class's struggle, and to make it functional, we need to struggle as a class. We need to take direct action. We need to take strike action. We're taught in 10th grade civics class that the state is class neutral, that it stands above social divisions, that it's a neutral arbiter. But that's not the truth of it. If it were, we would see real health and safety. You don't have to look any further than your tax code to see which class writes the laws and legislation. At every step, the employer class challenges health and safety regulations as they're proposed, written, legislated, promulgated, enforced, and adjudicated. They do not do this out of malaise or hatred of the workers. They do this under pressure of the shareholders for tangible, regular, predictable profit. Any animosity, intimidation, alienation of social relations between labor and management are the result of management's obligation to suck labor dry as it confronts each worker's obligation to go home safely and healthy to their families at the end of the day. That's the class conflict that we face every day on every job site. How does the ruling capitalist class collude with the leaders of labor management against the interests of the workers? I'm talking about what's happening with CAPS and PEGs, the engineers and scientists, as I try to wrap this up. Blanning & Baker is a for-profit corporation which runs 2 company unions, CAPS for the scientists and PEGs for the engineers. A company union is a union which cuts its deals with management against the interests of the rank and file and against the interests of the working class as a whole. Now, Blanning & Baker organized CAPS and PEGs, and for decades, Blanning & Baker have led them while also acting as the executive director of the Young Democrats of California, a political arm of California's political machine. While Blanning & Baker was able to deliver on bread and butter issues for PEG, it cut a Faustian deal, and that was to sacrifice the smaller bargaining units of the other unions. PEG and CAPS contracts were used as a battering ram against SEIU and other unions. PEG and CAPS represent a relatively uninterested layer of the labor aristocracy, which does not take much interest in their union. That's why they're able to be rolled over without regular meetings, why they're able to have hand-picked union representatives that meet the needs of the executive director, not the rank and file. And so the membership is kept in the blind. And the membership accepted the takeaways which former Governor Brown wanted to enforce on all 250,000 state workers during the 2015 bargaining period. This is a little complex, and thank you for bearing with me, but it's important for the interests of the working class to see how the unions operate with the political class of the capitalists, the Democrats and Republicans, and stand as a block against our advancing the interests of our class. Ultimately, the 16,000 scientists and engineers, mostly without even knowing it, signed off on these takebacks in the form of a payroll check-off contribution to pension medical insurance funds. Why? Because the capitalist politicians and Governor Brown wanted to ensure the for-profit medical and insurance companies can raise their premiums annually. And instead of looking to the 120-plus billionaires in the state of California, the governor went after the workers themselves, requiring a checkoff, which Blanning and Baker pushed through. And then SEIU followed suit, and the checkoff was enforced. And then it incrementally grew year after year. And workers are looking at their checks going, why it started at $30, is it now $80 or $100 every month? So we need more inspectors. Do we need the same ratios as Washington and Oregon? Do we need 1,000 inspectors? Is 1,000 even enough? I don't know. But I do know that if I had 10 new hires in my office tomorrow, I could keep them busy, very busy, fulfilling the mandate of the division. If the capitalist politicians had intended Cal-OSHA to be fully staffed and capable of meeting its mandate, they would have been by now. So the governor assigned new chiefs and directors with impeccable credentials and resumes after the debacle that was exposed in the audit. And they may have had the best intentions, but even they are constrained by the class nature of the state, which is far from being a neutral arbiter. So opposed to the capitalist state government, which pretends to be class neutral, but underserves the people, we need a workers' government which makes no claim to class neutrality. To enforce health and safety in the workplace and to build robust health and safety enforcement, workers need their own fighting workers' party. Such a party can only be built by the ranks of labor taking up class struggle tactics of strikes and direct action to build workers' power in the workplaces and in the streets, and with a strategy of political independence, of breaking from the Democratic Party and running labor candidates. Our labor candidates must run campaigns that are used to organize and mobilize the labor movement and the movements of the especially oppressed people to fight for transitional demands that chart a path from the basic needs, such as safety and health on the job and jobs for all, through massive public works programs to 30 hours work for 40 hours pay, housing for the unhoused, health care for the people, not for profit, free quality education from preschool to graduate school, and pensions, straight through class struggle and political independence to the nationalization under workers' control of the commanding heights of the economy and the democratic planning of production needed to build a healthy future. Thank you, sisters, brothers, co-workers, and friends.
Thank you, Charles. And some people may be asking, brothers and sisters and trade unionists, where are the trade union leaders of California? California has over 1 million workers, 1,200,000 workers. SEIU has over 700,000 workers in California. Where are these union officials? Why aren't they speaking out and demanding that Governor Newsom hire 1,000 OSHA agents? The reason is that they support Governor Newsom. They're tied to him politically, and they don't want to challenge him. So they are allowing workers to die on the job from COVID and get sick on COVID rather than challenging the Democratic governor of California. We say that's an outrage. We say that they are not representing the workers of California when they keep silent when the workers get contaminated and die on the job and contaminate their families. We have to put the workers of California first. We have to say, Governor Newsom, you are, and you are likely to be recalled because you've wrecked the economy. You are not standing up for the working class of California, and you are certainly not making these billionaires like Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and the rest of these billionaire families pay for this crisis. Even Argentina had a capital tax to pay for COVID. In California, they're letting these people scot-free go free. We say enough of that. We say defend the workers of California. 1,000 OSHA agents, make a capital tax on the billionaires to pay for it, and build a workers' party that will really defend the working class. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Make the billionaires pay. Workers over profits. Lives before profits. Governor Newsom, MIA. Labor Party now.